and welcome to the Mindful Being podcast, where we cultivate mindfulness in our lives, culture, and politics. I'm Jayme Woj, and today I'm here with Sarah Alysse, a good friend of mine for well over 10 years now. I'm going to let Sarah introduce herself, but something I've always loved about Sarah and our friendship is that we have a lot in common, but we also have a lot of difference in opinions about things. And even at the beginning of our friendship, before I think either of us were really into kind of mindfulness or well being or any of that stuff, I think the thing I respected most about our friendship was whenever we had a difference of opinion, we never really led from a place of judgment, but truly trying to understand why the other person thought the way they did. And curious what life experience or what facts they had that we didn't have, and a freedom to kind of share the information we had without feeling like it was ever going to become a battle or a non mindful experience. So that's what I've always just appreciated about our friendship. But why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you so much. And I'm very excited to be here with you. Like you said, we've been well over friends for over a decade now. And I'm Sarah Alysse. I am a stress management coach as well as a injury prevention specialist. I focus on enhancing my clients' fitness with mindfulness. So it's funny because we both have been on this journey separately in different states always. And what I find to be the most interesting about you is that your viewpoints have shifted over time, but the overall thing about Jayme is that he is so kind to everyone and he's always willing to listen. So I'm really excited that you're sharing your views more often now.
Thank you. Um, so I'm curious because with COVID and with everything going on, your business has kind of had to uh, morph. And I feel like you've, due to COVID, kind of brought in more mindfulness practice to your career and to your coaching. Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah. So at the very beginning, I saw everyone was going online and trying to figure out what they're going to do in the fitness industry. For me, I took a breath. I started to literally meditate on what I wanted to do during this time. I then took it upon myself to finish my personal training certification that I've been wanting to do forever. I've been a Pilates trainer for 10 years, but this was something I felt would get me to the next level in my training. I've always had dreams and aspirations of training athletes as well as stress managed coaching both athletes and CEOs of companies. And that idea of manifesting through action steps is what has gotten me to this point. So I really strongly believe that we all need to take moments to just breathe, reflect, and then react. So we are not overwhelming ourselves.
So, do you find that there was an easy kind of merger of the fitness Pilates stuff you were doing and the stress management, or do you kind of keep them somewhat separate? How does that work?
For a long time, I always kept them separate, and this was probably pre-COVID. And then I realized, wow, my clients are bringing in their stressors a lot to our sessions. So I always took 5 minutes out of our sessions to start talking more about stress management. Also, gut health is a big passion of mine, and being like, well, what's your gut saying to you in this moment while you're doing these exercises? And my clients were like, whoa, I feel like I'm in knots right now. And then their shoulders were rising up and they were just feeling tension throughout their body. And then we would dig deeper and talk about it. And then after they realized where it was coming from, we would go back to our session and continue. So I do keep a little element, or some elements of mindfulness and stress management coaching in our even our Pilates sessions. But for the most part now, I'm transitioning to individual coaching because I feel people need a whole hour to really talk out what's going on in their bodies as well as their minds.
And what I guess, and there may not be a real answer to this, but do you find that there's any kind of commonality to what is causing your clients stress? I guess beyond just the uncertainty of kind of the times with COVID and everything that's going on.
Yeah, I think this time has been just like it was for me, this reflecting period. Where do I want to go? I'm not happy at my job right now. I'm lucky to have a job, but is that where I want to be? So we would chat about that. And some people have decided I'm going to start prepping during this time so that when the market gets a little bit better, hey, I can go and do that. So we talk ways to go about change and dealing with it and valuing yourself more, even in uncertain times. Because the more you value yourself, the more likely you're going to exceed your expectations and find something more suitable for you and your needs now.
So do you mostly deal, I guess, with people who are concerned about kind of career elements in their lives, or does it go to personal relationships, other aspects as well?
I've noticed it starts with the career. That's always the number one problem because Americans, we're so functionally screwed up, just focusing on our careers and not really focusing on everything around you. You're not your relationships, But when you dig deeper, once they're like, okay, I can break away from this career and I can find something else. Well, what else? What brings you joy? That's something I say to my clients all the time. What would bring you joy now? What currently brings you joy? And then finding ways to add fun into your life. So that's important. We just, even in this time, we need fun. We need to have relationships with people, even though we can't necessarily touch them all the time now.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I think it's a unique to um, America, but it may just be kind of a unique thing to kind of capitalist societies in general. Kind of
Yep.
the focus on um, your business and your career kind of being, I don't want to say the biggest part of your identity, but I think the safest part of your identity.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is that it's kind of the thing people ask you immediately. It's a thing that you can express frustration about that people don't get critical of because everyone's frustrated by it. It's kind of the safest thing to talk about without, in a lot of, not always, but I think just in general, without needing to feel very vulnerable. So I guess it doesn't surprise me that that's kind of a starting point for a lot of people because it's the easiest place to go. And then kind of
Yeah.
as that goes, the layers kind of peel away, and then you can deal with kind of the real kind of stuff, the problems at the root core of who the person is, uh,
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
what they're putting at the walls they're putting up or whatever it is.
Exactly. And another thing that has been a topic, a common topic, and I don't know if it's because our society or maybe just the people I'm currently talking to, right? That the loss of spirituality and not being able to kind of connect to that because there's these feelings of I don't believe in God or which you have every right to feel. You could be an atheist, you could be agnostic, Christian, whatever, Jewish, a Buddhist, but a lot of people are having this loss and this inability to connect with themselves because there is this feeling of emptiness and kind of going into more meditation and reflection within that has given people this outlet of feeling more connected to their spirituality. So there is an element, it's like layers. You're peeling away these onions. You start with the career, then the relationships, and then that person's whole being. And you find a lot from that.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. I've been listening to, I'm a big fan of Marianne Williamson, and
Yes.
she just started a new podcast. And on the first episode, a common theme was kind of the lack of faith. And what's fascinating about it from not really a religious perspective, but that I do believe that humans innately need faith in something, right? And it doesn't necessarily need to be in religion. It can be I think I derive a lot of my faith from science, from
Yeah.
nature, from non-religious or typically spiritual forms. But I don't really think we have a conversation about that happening. So I think as
Hmm.
more people kind of become non-religious, there's no talk about how do we nurture their faith in something in themselves and in others in the world and what, because I see just a lot of, like what you're saying, just feelings of kind of loss, and people don't understand what it is that they're feeling loss about.
Right. Right. It's almost like their value system they feel is not non-existent too.
Right.
And I said to a couple of my clients, like, well, what's the most important thing to you? Is it being religious or is it having your own value system? And you can take elements of what you had as a child, but if there were things that you didn't like or don't agree with, you don't have to use that for your specific values.
Yeah. The other interesting thing that I found in the podcast, the reason I like the podcast is she brings in a lot of spiritual leaders, and I'm not very religious.
Right.
So it's just an interesting perspective that I always don't think of because I don't have the experiences of these people. And one of the kind of criticisms one of the guests was talking about of our culture is the focus on the individual, which I've always seen as a positive of kind of feeling like having a strong sense of self care and self motivation and kind of feeling special and finding your what makes you special and makes you feel good. And they were talking about how the other side of that, though, is that we get farther and farther away from kind of a communal identity, which is what, in a lot of ways, religious organizations have given people throughout the generations as a place to kind of gather in common interest and kind of have shared experiences, where I don't feel like a lot of people have that outside of a religious context. And I think it's 100% possible to have and not very difficult to have outside of a religious context. I think it's just people aren't aware that they're missing it. But
Right.
maybe they're becoming more aware now with kind of COVID and everything happening and being forced to kind of just be alone for so long. I think there's starting to be an understanding and a yearning for that communal space.
Hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I'm not really interested in the political views of your clients, but do you find that with the election looming, that does politics kind of play a role in the stress of your clients? Have you noticed that, or how does that play in?
I feel it depends on what my client's occupation is again. So some of them, it might be an underlying factor for them, especially if they're one of the more oppressed groups. But for some of my clients that might be in the financial industry, they have different viewpoints, and we don't necessarily go into it. I do know some people's opinions. I try very hard to keep everything separated and just kind of analyze the situation. I have noticed that through our talks that they might have changed their belief system based off of who they really realize is them as a person. So some of the things that they're taking on socially outside of work, they have now been like, wow, I never realized this group was in such a horrible situation. And that really worries me for our future and for my grandkids' future. So it's interesting how there's been subtle mind shifts for them.
Yeah,
Do I know if that will change to what they do at the polls? I'm not certain, but I like to at least have these conversations so they're aware of, and especially since they're taking these action steps to do things outside of career now, I'm happy to see that they're noticing things aren't right and
right.
what's going on in our communities.
Yeah, and I think that's I don't want to undermine how much of a big achievement just that is in today's world where really so many people can't even converse mindfully about I don't even want to just say politics, about anything,
Anything,
where it
right?
just is constantly their walls are up and they're not taking their walls down because they're on the defensive, and then it's two people with different opinions, both refusing to actually listen or care about the other person as a human being, and it's just nothing happens. And I see a lot on social media of people wanting kind of how do I reach to people who think differently than me, and how do we have a meaningful conversation they don't know. So I think it's a huge just achievement to be able to do that and to create spaces where people can learn how to let their guard down and how to truly listen to other people and express themselves without feeling like they're going to be judged. I think just creating more of those spaces for people is very important because it allows people to change and to adapt, and that's really what our nature should be, because
Mhm.
we only have a limited amount of knowledge and we're taking in knowledge all the time. We're constantly changing. And I think we're seeing this idea that often I see it, at least, that change is bad, and that there's really no. I think you see it with kind of the cancel culture and things like that. Of like, no one's allowed to change or grow or kind of be redeemed for um, moments of ignorance in their past life. And the problem I see with that is that then there's no incentive for people to change, because then their walls just immediately go up and their whole focus is on just kind of double downing on whatever they already believe, and finding the people who already believe what they believe to help support them,
Yes.
versus actually being open and being able to grow together, as kind of just individuals and as friends and as family and as just a communal people.
Yeah, and I feel at the beginning of all this too, people weren't willing to listen, especially, I mean, right after George Floyd, for example. I felt that's when I saw such a dividedness instead of people coming together and talking about everyone was just choosing a side. It was either you were police or for black people. And I was like, well, can't we just find some common ground and note that, hey, our police does need to be reformed, but we also need to acknowledge what's going on in these specific communities, in these black men specific communities. They're the ones that are getting shot the most, and we have to acknowledge it. And the fact that a lot of communities are suffering, it's just a shame that we're not able to get past that it's a black and white issue.
Yeah, I think and I don't know where it comes from, but I don't know if it's just human nature or if it's just the way our society has developed through the centuries of
Hmm.
this false duality that we feel we need to create for everything, where there's two sides and you have to pick one, and there's no middle ground, where when you actually let your guard down and talk on a human level, you realize, wow, we have a lot more in common, and there's all these other options. It doesn't have to be in this specific example, it doesn't have to be like black lives versus police. There
Right.
can be a lot of things we can do to, one, help the police do a better job at their job, and help lift black communities and protect black communities. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And yet I think there's a lot that goes into it. I think it's the power system that those in power want to create, that because it keeps us fighting and not really talking about solutions, because they don't necessarily want solutions because they may lose power if there is. I think there's a lot of issues with it. But I think what I like to say a lot is all of our major issues, I believe, and I've learned kind of through my mindfulness journey, are really just symptoms of what's happening inside of us as individuals. And until we learn how to just talk to one another in a mindful way. We can't expect our politics and our governments and any of these bigger systems to function mindfully because they're built of people. So if we're not teaching people how to be mindful, we can't expect then people led organizations and systems to be mindful.
Right. Exactly. 100%. It's like our big problem as a society right now. And I also think with a little more emphasis on mental health services and getting those communities and maybe even our police officers, honestly, because they go through a lot too. Why are they being handed guns? Why aren't they being handed other tools to help talk to people that might be on a mental break? I don't understand that. And especially if they're the ones primarily in the communities.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So,
I think we've made a lot of progress when it comes to kind of the stigma of mental health. But I think there's a lot of still stigma there.
mhm,
And it's a hard issue because again it's kind of a systemic problem of the way we see and view mental illness, and not dissimilar to the way we view like drug addictions, that we kind of place it on. Uh, we don't treat it as much as an illness as we do as a judgment of the person. And I think until we figure out how to not do that, um, yeah, it's just not going to be a hard issue for people to really see because I think, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this. It's because it stumps me.
yeah, yeah. And we just have to hope that people down the line have solutions for this. But it's very, very challenging. It's a very challenging topic. And I just feel that if we had more help in those areas, not just, I feel like it's super easy for me, this white girl, to get mental health service. Like if I need to have a therapy session, my plan covers it, or my plan, it's a minimal charge for me, someone like me. But for other people, it's very difficult to even get anyone in their community to help
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, and it's
So,
it's so many things. 'Cause it's that, and it's also the stigma. So a lot of people don't want to go seek help because they feel it
weak.
makes them look crazy, or it makes them look weak, or it makes them look that they just have opinions about it, judgments. So it's a lot of
Yeah.
things. But shifting back, I'm curious where you see your business growing to, or what's kind of the goals with it.
So I want my business, what I really want to do with my business is to give athletes, college, NFLs, MLB. I have big dreams for this. Manifesting my reality and taking those steps right now to get there is helping people manage their stress properly so that they aren't so injury prone, so that they are able to focus in on the game ahead versus worrying about everything else going on in their lives. And that's helping them find ways to manage their finances, getting them into the right circles of where they need to be to help them prevent their stress going exponentially high.
Nice. And what do you think? I guess if you could give people just one tool, kind of one initial tool that you feel is kind of the seed to helping manage stress, what would you say that is? Big question.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I would start with, this is an old trick, but writing down three things you are grateful for every day and honoring that and what basically brings you joy. If you see that you're constantly writing the same three things down, great, but I challenge you to go deeper and then reflect on the things that don't bring you joy and strive hard to, okay, find ways to make you um, make you acknowledge what you want to change behaviorally in your life. Write it down. I always think writing down or saying out loud what's really happening, even though you might look like a crazy person talking to yourself, do it at home if you don't want to do it on the street. But I've definitely been like, oh, I really need to work on this. I see that I'm eating food while I am walking down the street. I'm not enjoying my food. That's something I really need to work on. Just giving yourself that time to reflect, journal, also find things you're grateful for. Those are those are the yin and the yang of what can successfully help you to reduce your stress.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because as an actor, I worked with an acting business coach named Bonnie Gillespie, and she always used to say, "If it's not written down, it's not real." And I fully believe that, and everyone's different, but I've always found that my head, even at my most mindful and calm, have multiple swirling thoughts going all the time. And the only way to truly organize them is to write them down, because it's the only thing that kind of makes them tangible and real outside of just being a random collection of thoughts in my head. And it really transforms kind of every part of my life doing that, whether it's me just writing something down, lyrics to a song about kind of feeling frustrated about something or some kind of emotional thing I'm going through,
Mm-hmm.
or just writing things down for my business and scheduling so I can see everything organized. Just game changer.
It is. It is a game changer. You got to take risks.
It's true. Well, I think that is there anything else you would like to talk about?
All I wanted to say, if anyone has any questions about how to manage their stress, I am on all the social medias, right? But I also have a website called livewellenhanceyou.com. You can go there and you can actually schedule a personalized 30-minute blueprint to reduce stress. It's a 30-minute talk with me, and I'd be happy. I just love to chat with new people. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, check her out because Sarah is wonderful if you haven't realized it already. And
Thanks, Jayme.
you're welcome. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on Mindful Being.